In a kingdom known for its grand castles, sprawling gardens, and rich traditions, the royal guards were as much a symbol of pride as the monarchy itself. They stood tall outside the palace gates, their armor gleaming under the sun, their faces stern and unchanging. These men and women were trained to be perfect, disciplined, loyal, and utterly expressionless. To the common people, they seemed almost untouchable, like statues carved from steel rather than flesh and blood. Among these guards was Captain Alden, a man whose name was whispered with respect throughout the kingdom. He had served 3 kings and 1 queen, always without question or hesitation. His reputation was legendary. He never broke rank, never smiled, and never showed even a flicker of emotion while on duty. Many believed he didn't have feelings at all, but those who knew him well understood that his heart was simply locked away behind the heavy shield of responsibility. Alden's life revolved around protecting the royal family and maintaining order in the kingdom. Every morning, he would rise before dawn, polish his armor until it sparkled, and take his position outside the palace gates. From there, he watched the world go by. The bustling market stalls, the children running through cobblestone streets, the farmers bringing in carts laden with fresh produce. But no matter how lively the scene, Alden remained still, his gaze fixed straight ahead, his posture unwavering. One day, however, something unusual caught his attention. As he stood guard near the edge of the marketplace, a faint melody drifted toward him. It was soft but hauntingly familiar, a tune he hadn't heard since he was a boy growing up in a small village far from the palace. The music came from a young street musician sitting cross-legged on the ground, strumming an old, battered lute. Around him, a small crowd had gathered, clapping and cheering as coins clinked into his hat. For a brief moment, Alden forgot where he was. Memories flooded back, of summer nights spent listening to his father play the same tune by the fire, of laughter shared with friends under starlit skies. His lips twitched ever so slightly, and his hand instinctively moved to rest on the hilt of his sword, not out of habit, but as if seeking balance. Then, reality snapped back into focus. He stiffened, forcing his face back into its usual mask of neutrality. No one noticed, not the crowd, not the musician, not even the other guards standing nearby. Yet, deep inside, Alden felt a crack forming in the wall he built around his emotions. That night, as he lay in his quarters, the melody played over and over in his mind. For the first time in years, Alden allowed himself to think about the person he used to be, the carefree boy who dreamed of adventure, not the stoic captain bound by duty. He wondered if anyone else saw him as more than just a figure in armor. Did the villagers know his name? Did they see him as human or merely as part of the palace walls? Little did Alden realize that this single moment of vulnerability would set off a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the entire kingdom. What started as a fleeting memory sparked by a simple song would soon grow into something far greater, an awakening that would remind everyone, including Alden himself, that even the strongest walls can crumble when touched by kindness and connection. The next morning brought a change to Alden's usual routine. Instead of standing guard at the palace gates, he was assigned to escort Princess Elira, the youngest daughter of the king, on one of her frequent trips to the marketplace. Unlike her siblings, Elira had little interest in courtly affairs or royal ceremonies. She preferred exploring the bustling streets of the kingdom, mingling with the townsfolk, and learning about their lives. Her curiosity often led her to wander off alone, disguised in plain clothes to avoid drawing attention. Today, however, protocol demanded that Captain Alden accompany her. As they walked side by side through the crowded market, Elira moved with an easy grace, stopping occasionally to admire handmade crafts or sample freshly baked bread. Alden, on the other hand, kept his distance, scanning the area for any signs of trouble. His presence was both reassuring and intimidating. Vendors paused mid-sale to glance nervously at the towering figure in shining armor trailing behind the princess. Elira seemed unfazed by his stoic demeanor. If anything, she found it amusing. "You don't have to look so serious all the time," She teased over her shoulder as they passed a stall selling colorful scarves. "It's just a market, not a battlefield." Alden didn't respond. He simply adjusted his grip on the hilt of his sword and continued scanning the crowd. But as they ventured deeper into the heart of the market, something unexpected happened. From a nearby corner came the sound of music, a familiar melody that made Alden's steps falter. It was the same tune he'd heard the day before, played by the young street musician with the battered lute. Only this time, the performer was different. An elderly blind minstrel seated beside a small boy who sang along in a clear, sweet voice. Elira stopped in her tracks, captivated by the performance. The song was haunting yet uplifting, weaving together notes of joy and longing in a way that resonated with everyone who listened. Without hesitation, she reached into her pocket, pulled out several gold coins, and dropped them into the minstrel's hat. The old man bowed his head in gratitude, while the boy beamed up at her. To Alden's surprise, he felt a strange urge rising within him, an impulse he hadn't experienced in years. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward and added a coin of his own. For a split second, his face softened and his lips parted as if he wanted to say something. But then reality crashed back down, and he snapped back into his rigid stance, mortified by what he'd just done. Elira noticed immediately, turning to him with a mischievous glint in her eye. She said, "That song must mean something to you, doesn't it?" Her tone wasn't mocking but genuinely curious. Alden hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "It's nothing," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. But Elira wasn't convinced. She studied him closely, sensing there was more to this man than met the eye. On their way back to the palace, Elira couldn't shake the image of Alden dropping that coin. It was such a small gesture, yet it revealed a crack in the impenetrable armor he wore, not just physically, but emotionally. She realized that beneath the stern exterior lay a person with memories, feelings, and perhaps even regrets. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, she felt drawn to uncovering the real man behind the uniform. Meanwhile, Alden wrestled with his own thoughts. Why had he acted on impulse? What was it about that song that stirred something so deeply buried? As much as he tried to push the questions aside, they lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Little did he know, this encounter with Elira would mark the beginning of a journey, one that would challenge everything he believed about duty, identity, and the power of human connection. In the days that followed, Alden found himself unable to forget the encounter with Princess Elira and the blind minstrel's song. The melody echoed in his mind like a ghost from his past, haunting yet strangely comforting. It reminded him of simpler times, of sitting by the fire as a child, listening to stories and music that filled the air with warmth. But those memories felt distant now, buried beneath years of discipline and duty. Still, they lingered, tugging at him in ways he couldn't ignore. Determined to quiet the restless thoughts, Alden began sneaking brief visits to the marketplace during his rare moments off-duty. He told himself it was just to observe, to ensure the area remained safe for the royal family. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to hear the music again. On one such visit, he spotted the same blind minstrel playing near a fountain, surrounded by a small crowd. This time, however, the boy who had sung alongside him was absent, leaving the old man to perform alone. Alden stood at the edge of the gathering, trying to blend into the shadows. He listened intently, letting the notes wash over him. The song was different today, slower and sadder, but it carried the same raw emotion that had stirred something within him before. As the final chord faded, the crowd erupted into applause. Without thinking, Alden joined in, clapping louder than anyone else. The sound of his hands meeting echoed through the square, drawing startled looks from nearby shoppers. For a moment, all eyes were on him. The stoic guard who never smiled, never spoke, and certainly never clapped. Alden froze, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. He glanced around, expecting disapproval or ridicule, but instead, he saw smiles. Some people even nodded approvingly, as if silently thanking him for breaking his usual silence. Word of the guard who applauded spread quickly through the marketplace. By the next day, whispers about Alden's unexpected display of emotion reached every corner of the town. Vendors joked about it while setting up their stalls. Children mimicked the sound of clapping whenever they passed a guard, and even the palace staff couldn't resist gossiping about the incident over dinner. Meanwhile, Princess Elira grew increasingly intrigued by Alden's behavior. She had always viewed the guards as extensions of the palace walls, necessary but impersonal. Yet after witnessing his reaction to the minstrel song, she began to see him differently. There was more to this man than met the eye, and she was determined to uncover it. During their next outing together, Elira deliberately led Alden toward a lively square where dancers performed under strings of colorful lanterns. The rhythmic beats of drums and the cheerful laughter of onlookers created an infectious energy that even Alden couldn't ignore. When the performance ended, the crowd burst into enthusiastic applause. Once again, Alden found himself joining in, this time without hesitation. His actions didn't go unnoticed. A young girl standing nearby turned to him with wide eyes and said, "Even the guards like to clap." Her innocence brought chuckles from those around her, and Alden felt a strange warmth in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he realized that his role wasn't just about protecting. It was also about connecting. Elira watched the scene unfold with a satisfied smile. She could see the subtle changes in Alden, the way his shoulders relaxed, the faint softening of his expression. Though he still tried to maintain his stoic facade, cracks were beginning to show. And as much as Alden might have resisted it, these moments of vulnerability were slowly transforming him, not just as a guard, but as a person. Little did either of them know, these small acts of breaking character would soon ripple outward, touching not only their lives, but the entire kingdom. The shift in Alden's behavior didn't happen overnight, but it was noticeable enough to spark curiosity, and sometimes concern, among those around him. Princess Elira, who had always seen the royal guards as distant figures bound by rigid rules, now found herself eager to peel back the layers of Alden's carefully constructed armor. She began inviting him on more frequent excursions outside the palace walls, no longer just for official duties, but for moments of genuine exploration. One sunny afternoon, Elira led Alden to a quiet riverside where children played tag, their laughter ringing out like bells. The sight was a stark contrast to the formalities of court life, and Alden couldn't help but watch with a flicker of nostalgia. He remembered his own childhood, running barefoot through fields and splashing in streams without a care in the world. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, yet they stirred something deep within him. As the two stood observing the scene, one of the children, a little girl with pigtails, tripped over a rock and fell hard onto the grass. Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched her scraped knee. Before Elira could react, Alden stepped forward instinctively. Kneeling beside the girl, he spoke in a voice so gentle it seemed to belong to a different man. "It's all right," he said softly. "Let me see." The child sniffled but nodded, allowing Alden to examine her injury. From his belt pouch, he produced a clean handkerchief and carefully dabbed at the scrape. "You're brave," he told her with a small smile. "This will heal before you know it." The moment was brief, but its impact lingered. The other children gathered around, watching in awe as the imposing guard transformed into someone kind and approachable. Even Elira, standing nearby, felt a lump rise in her throat. She had never imagined seeing this side of Alden, a man whose stern exterior had once seemed impenetrable. Word of the incident spread quickly among the townsfolk. By evening, stories of the guard who comforted a child reached every corner of the market. People whispered about how Alden had not only helped the girl but also reassured her friends that accidents were a normal part of growing up. It was such a simple act, yet it resonated deeply with everyone who heard it. Back at the palace, however, not everyone viewed these changes positively. Some of Alden's fellow guards grumbled about his growing tendency to break protocol. They argued that showing emotion or engaging too personally with citizens undermined the authority and professionalism expected of their role. Others admired his courage, seeing his actions as proof that guards could be both protectors and human beings. Despite the mixed reactions, Alden found himself opening up in ways he hadn't thought possible. During another outing with Elira, he shared fragments of his past, the village where he grew up, the music his father used to play, and the dreams he once had of becoming a musician himself. Elira listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. For the first time, she saw Alden not as a symbol of duty, but as a person with hopes, regrets, and untold stories. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Elira began teasing Alden gently, calling him the guard with a secret heart. To her surprise, he responded with dry humor, revealing a wit she hadn't expected. Their interactions became lighter, filled with shared laughter and mutual respect. What started as an unlikely friendship blossomed into something deeper, a partnership built on trust and understanding. For Alden, these moments were transformative. He realized that being a guard wasn't just about standing tall and unyielding. It was about connecting with the people he swore to protect. And for Elira, Alden's journey served as a reminder that even the most stoic individuals carried hidden depths worth uncovering. Unbeknownst to them, their evolving relationship would soon inspire others to rethink what it meant to serve, not just as guards, but as members of a community united by compassion and humanity. The whispers about Alden's actions reached the ears of Lord Chancellor Vane, a man known for his strict adherence to tradition and protocol. To Vane, the royal guards were not just protectors. They were symbols of order and discipline. Any deviation from their stoic demeanor was seen as a threat to the kingdom's stability. When reports surfaced of Alden clapping at performances, comforting children, and even sharing stories with townsfolk, Vane decided it was time to intervene. Summoned to the Grand Council chamber, Alden stood before the Chancellor and a group of advisors, his armor gleaming under the chandelier's light. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of parchment as Vane reviewed the complaints against him. "Captain Alden," Vane began, his voice sharp and unyielding, "you have served this kingdom with distinction for many years. However, recent accounts suggest that your conduct has strayed from the standards expected of a royal guard." Alden straightened his posture, preparing himself for reprimand. He knew he had broken unwritten rules, but he also believed in the humanity behind his actions. Before he could respond, the heavy doors of the chamber swung open, and Princess Elira strode in, her presence commanding yet warm. Her cheeks were flushed, as if she had rushed to get there, and her eyes sparkled with determination. "Chancellor Vane," she said firmly, addressing the room, "before you pass judgment on Captain Alden, I would like to speak on his behalf." Without waiting for permission, she stepped forward, standing beside Alden. The contrast between them was striking, her vibrant energy against his composed stillness, but their unity in purpose was undeniable. "These guards are not machines," Elira continued, her voice ringing clear. "They are people with hearts and souls. We ask them to risk their lives for us, to stand watch while we sleep, to protect our families without question. But do we ever stop to think about what they sacrifice? Do we see them as human beings, or merely as tools of the crown?" She turned to face the advisors, her gaze steady. "Captain Alden has shown kindness where it was needed most. He has reminded us that strength isn't just about wielding a sword. It's about compassion, about understanding. If breaking character means helping a child who's fallen or applauding someone's hard work, then perhaps it's time we redefine what it means to serve." The room fell silent. Vane frowned, clearly displeased by the interruption, but he couldn't deny the weight of Elira's words. One of the older advisors nodded slowly, murmuring, "Perhaps there is wisdom in this perspective." Encouraged, Elira pressed on. "Imagine a kingdom where the guards aren't feared but respected, not because of their weapons, but because of their humanity. Imagine a world where every citizen feels protected, not just physically, but emotionally. That is the legacy we should strive for. Her speech left an indelible mark on everyone present. Even Vane, though reluctant, conceded that change might be necessary. The meeting ended without punishment for Alden, but with a directive to explore ways to balance tradition with empathy. In the weeks that followed, Alden's stories spread throughout the palace and beyond. Other guards began following his example, finding small but meaningful ways to connect with the people they protected. Some handed out water to weary travelers during festivals, while others offered encouraging words to struggling vendors. These gestures may have seemed minor, but their impact was profound. For Alden, the shift was both humbling and empowering. He realized that his actions hadn't just changed how others saw him. They had inspired a movement. And for Illyra, seeing the ripple effects of her defense of Alden reinforced her belief in the power of compassion to bridge divides. Together, they proved that even the smallest acts of humanity could reshape an entire kingdom, one heart at a time. The annual Festival of Lights was the most celebrated event in the kingdom, a time when the entire community came together to honor unity, hope, and renewal. Streets were adorned with colorful lanterns, and the air buzzed with laughter, music, and the aroma of festive foods. Traditionally, the royal guards played a passive role during the festival, standing watch from the sidelines while the townsfolk reveled in joy. But this year, Captain Alden had something different in mind. Inspired by the subtle changes he'd witnessed among his fellow guards, and encouraged by Princess Illyra, Alden proposed an idea that would break centuries of tradition. Instead of remaining distant observers, the guards would actively participate in the festivities. Their mission? To ensure every citizen could join in the celebration by distributing candles to those who couldn't afford them. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried profound meaning. On the night of the festival, the guards took their positions not at barricades or gates, but along the bustling streets, each carrying baskets filled with small, glowing candles. As families gathered in the central square, Alden stepped forward, holding a lit candle high above his head. "Tonight," he announced, his voice steady yet warm, "we light these flames not just to celebrate, but to remind ourselves that even the smallest light can drive away darkness." The crowd erupted into cheers, and soon the guards were weaving through the throngs of people, handing out candles to anyone who needed one. Children giggled as they received their tiny flames, while elderly couples exchanged grateful smiles. For the first time, the guards weren't seen as figures of authority, but as neighbors sharing in the joy of the occasion. Illyra watched from a balcony overlooking the square, her heart swelling with pride. She saw how effortlessly Alden interacted with the townsfolk, his usual stoicism replaced by genuine warmth. When a young boy accidentally dropped his candle, Alden knelt down to help relight it, patting the child on the shoulder before moving on. These moments may have seemed small, but they spoke volumes about the shift happening within the guard corps. As the evening wore on, thousands of candles flickered in unison, casting a golden glow over the square. The scene was breathtaking, a sea of lights stretching as far as the eye could see. People linked arms, sang songs, and shared stories, united by the shared flame. Even the usually reserved Chancellor Vane admitted privately to Illyra that the sight was remarkable. But what truly marked the night as unforgettable was the bond forged between the guards and the citizens. No longer were the guards viewed as distant enforcers. They were now seen as protectors in the truest sense, not just of safety, but of spirit. One vendor approached Alden with tears in her eyes, thanking him for making the festival accessible to everyone. Another man shook his hand, saying, "You've shown us you're human too." By the end of the night, the barriers that had long separated the guards from the people they served had all but dissolved. What remained was a newfound sense of connection, built on trust and mutual respect. And at the center of it all stood Alden, the man who had dared to lead by example. For many, the Festival of Lights became more than just a celebration. It became a symbol of unity and compassion, sparked by the courage of one guard to step beyond tradition. As the last notes of music faded into the night, the kingdom felt stronger, closer, and more alive than ever before. The impact of Alden's actions extended far beyond the Festival of Lights. What had started as a single guard daring to show kindness grew into a movement that transformed the entire Royal Guard Corps, and eventually, the kingdom itself. The king, moved by the unity and goodwill displayed during the festival, issued a formal decree encouraging guards to engage more openly with citizens. Training programs were updated to emphasize not only discipline and combat skills, but also empathy and communication. For the first time in generations, the role of a royal guard evolved from being merely a protector to becoming a bridge between the monarchy and its people. Alden became the face of this transformation. His fellow guards, once skeptical of his unorthodox behavior, now looked up to him as a mentor. Young recruits sought his advice on how to balance professionalism with humanity, often finding themselves inspired by his quiet wisdom. Being strong doesn't mean you can't be kind, he would tell them during training sessions. In fact, true strength lies in knowing when to let your guard down, for the right reasons. Outside the palace walls, the townsfolk began seeing the guards in a new light. No longer did they view these armored figures as distant or intimidating. Instead, they saw individuals who cared about their well-being. Guards started participating in community events, helping farmers carry heavy loads at harvest time, joining in local festivals, and even sharing meals with families during special occasions. These small acts of connection fostered trust and camaraderie, breaking down barriers that had existed for centuries. For Alden personally, the change brought unexpected fulfillment. He formed lasting bonds with many townspeople, especially the musicians whose songs had first stirred his soul. On weekends, he could often be found sitting quietly near the marketplace, listening to performances and occasionally clapping along without hesitation. Children who once ran from the sight of guards now waved at him cheerfully, calling him Captain Candle after his role in the Festival of Lights. Even the blind minstrel he encountered months ago greeted him warmly whenever their paths crossed, thanking him for reigniting hope in the community. Princess Elira played an instrumental role in supporting Alden's vision. She used her influence to advocate for policies that strengthened ties between the palace and the people, ensuring that the changes weren't just temporary but enduring. Under her guidance, the palace hosted regular gatherings where guards and citizens could interact freely, sharing stories and learning from one another. These events became cherished traditions, celebrated by all. As years passed, tales of Alden's compassion spread far beyond the borders of the kingdom. Travelers shared stories of a royal guard who broke character to comfort a child, handed out candles to those in need, and listened to music with tears in his eyes. These anecdotes painted a picture of a man who embodied both strength and tenderness, a rare combination that left a lasting impression on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. Through it all, Alden remained humble, never seeking recognition for what he had done. But deep inside, he felt a profound sense of purpose. He realized that his journey hadn't been about changing others. It had been about rediscovering himself. By embracing his humanity, he had not only redefined what it meant to be a guard, but also reminded the entire kingdom of the power of kindness to unite hearts and heal divides. And so, the legacy of Captain Alden lived on, not just in the stories told by those who knew him, but in the everyday moments of connection that continued to flourish throughout the land. A single act of vulnerability had sparked a ripple effect, proving that even the smallest gestures could leave an indelible mark on the world. Years passed, and the kingdom continued to thrive under the legacy of compassion Alden had unknowingly ignited. The once rigid image of the royal guards had softened into something far more meaningful, a symbol of unity, trust, and humanity. For Alden, however, time eventually brought the inevitable: retirement. Though his body remained strong, he felt it was time to step aside and let a new generation carry the torch. On his final day of service, the entire town turned out to honor him. The streets were lined with people holding banners, flowers, and candles, the same kind he had handed out during the Festival of Lights years ago. Musicians filled the air with melodies, their instruments blending together in a symphony of gratitude. Children ran up to him, pressing handmade drawings into his hands, while elderly townsfolk patted his shoulder, thanking him for all he had done. It was a farewell unlike any other, a celebration not just of his career but of the man he had become. At the palace gates, Princess Illyra, now Queen Illyra, waited to bid him goodbye. She stood tall, her regal robes shimmering in the sunlight, yet there was warmth in her eyes that no crown could overshadow. As Alden approached, she stepped forward and embraced him tightly, surprising everyone present. "You've given us so much," she said softly, "more than you'll ever know." Then, with a smile, she presented him with a small wooden box. Inside lay a ceremonial medal engraved with words that made Alden's throat tighten, "For breaking character and mending hearts." Tears welled in his eyes as he accepted it, overwhelmed by the weight of her gesture. He wanted to say something, anything, but found himself speechless. Instead, he bowed deeply, his armor glinting one last time under the sun before he removed it forever. That evening, as Alden walked through the quiet marketplace alone, he reflected on how much had changed since the days when he first heard that haunting melody. Back then, he had been a man bound by duty, afraid to show even a flicker of emotion. Now, he left behind a kingdom transformed, one where guards smiled freely, children laughed without fear, and citizens saw their protectors not as distant figures but as friends. As he reached the edge of the square, the musicians struck up a familiar tune, the very song that had started it all those years ago. This time, Alden didn't hesitate. He stopped, closed his eyes, and let the music wash over him. When it ended, he joined in the applause, clapping loudly alongside the crowd. No one stared this time. Instead, they cheered, celebrating the man who had taught them that even the strongest walls could crumble when touched by kindness. In the years that followed, Alden settled into a peaceful life outside the palace. He spent his days tending to a small garden, visiting old friends in the market, and mentoring young recruits who sought his guidance. His story became legend, told and retold at festivals, in classrooms, and around dinner tables. Parents reminded their children of the guard who dared to be human, while musicians composed ballads about the captain who rediscovered his heart. Queen Illyra often visited him, seeking advice or simply sharing stories of how his influence continued to shape the kingdom. Under her reign, the bond between royalty, guards, and citizens grew stronger than ever. Her policies ensured that empathy remained at the core of leadership, a lesson she had learned from Alden's example. And so, Captain Alden's journey came full circle, not as a tale of duty or discipline, but as a testament to the power of connection. He had begun as a man hiding behind armor, afraid to reveal his true self, and ended as a beacon of hope for an entire kingdom. Through his courage to break character, he reminded everyone that even the smallest acts of vulnerability could light up the darkest corners of the world, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply be human.